Hello, and welcome to the well-read Monocle. Today, we are opening the pages of Black Wings of Cthulhu, the first volume in a series of anthologies edited by S.T. Joshi. This collection brings together 21 tales of Lovecraftian horror from a variety of modern authors, each exploring the cosmic dread and eldritch themes established by H.P. Lovecraft. In this video, I shall be providing a complete narrative recap of every story in the collection in the order they appear. We shall examine the plots, the characters, and the dark conclusions that await them. So, settle in as we journey through these modern mythos tales. We begin with Pickman's Other Model, 1929, by Caitlin R. Kiernan. The narrator, a former college friend of William Thurber, recounts the events leading to Thurber's suicide. Thurber had developed a morbid obsession with the artist Richard Upton Pickman. Following Thurber's death, the narrator discovers a portfolio among his friend's possessions containing sketches by Pickman. These include 2 charcoal nudes of a woman named Vera Endicott, a silent film actress. The narrator investigates Vera, discovering she is actually Lillian Snow, a woman from a disreputable family in Ipswich with rumors of sorcery and inbreeding. The narrator attends a screening of an obscure underground film featuring Vera. In the film, she performs a ritual at a pool surrounded by trees composed of contorted human bodies. Later, the narrator tracks Vera down to a flat in Boston. She is aged beyond her years and cynical. When confronted with the sketches, she reveals a deformity that Pickman captured realistically, a vestigial tail, which she had surgically removed. The story concludes with the narrator reading a newspaper report of Vera's murder. She was found disemboweled and hanging in a burying ground, labeled an apostate. The narrator is left haunted by nightmares of the shadows he glimpsed in her films. Desert Dreams by Donald R. Burleson. The protagonist is a man living in Providence, Rhode Island, who begins suffering from vivid, recurring nightmares of a desert landscape he has never visited. In these dreams, he sees a wizened Native American shaman chanting the syllables, Gwai-Ti. Seeking answers, he consults an anthropologist at Brown University, who reveals that Gwai-Ti is an obscure cannibalistic deity from southwestern folklore, dwelling beneath the earth. Driven by a compulsion to find the source of the dreams, the narrator travels to New Mexico. He drives into the desert, eventually locating the exact landscape from his nightmares. He discovers a stone monolith covered in ancient petroglyphs. As he stands there, he hears a thrumming sound from the ground and the chanting of the name Gwai-Ti. Realizing the entity is real and attempting to claim him, he flees back to his car in a panic, barely escaping before the earth opens. He returns to Providence, forever haunted by the knowledge that consciousnesses beyond our understanding can reach across space to snare the unwary. Engravings by Joseph S. Pulver, Sr. Johnny is a courier driving through a torrential rainstorm with a package in the trunk he must deliver by a specific deadline. He is terrified of his employer, a mysterious figure named Mr. Phoenix. Johnny recalls his abusive childhood and a life of violence, hoping the money from this job will allow him to escape to Mexico. He arrives at the meeting spot, a desert location marked by strange rock formations. Mr. Phoenix awaits him, accompanied by strange black cats. Phoenix reveals that the package in the trunk is empty. The delivery was merely a ruse to bring Johnny to this specific location at a specific time. Phoenix explains that he has manipulated Johnny's entire life, protecting him from harm only to preserve him for this moment. Phoenix identifies himself as the opener of the way. Johnny is paralyzed by magic as Phoenix prepares to sacrifice him with a blade, opening a door to something beyond human comprehension. Copping Squid by Michael Shea. Ricky Deuce is a sober ex-alcoholic working the night shift at a liquor store. He is approached by a frantic, bleeding man named Andre, who demands money and a ride. Andre claims he needs to connect with a deity. Intrigued by the man's intensity and the strange word Cthulhu on his shirt, Ricky drives him into a dangerous neighborhood known as the Hood. Andre reveals a horrific surgical modification. His ribs have been removed on one side, exposing his internal organs, a preparation for his encounter. They drive to a house in the hills overlooking San Francisco, inhabited by an old woman, Mama Hag, and a massive dog. They are led to a giant water tank where they gaze into a black mirror. The mirror reveals a vision of the Great Old One, Cthulhu, consuming the city and the souls of its inhabitants. Andre leaps into the vision, sacrificing himself. Ricky, terrified but changed, flees. He returns to the hood, buys a bottle of whiskey, and drinks it, realizing the mundane world no longer holds meaning. He considers buying blood money from a local gangster to gain access to the vision again, forever altering his path. Passing Spirits by Sam Gafford. The narrator is a man dying of a brain tumor who begins to see the ghost of H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft speaks to him, expressing bitterness that he is remembered only for his monster gods. As the narrator's illness progresses and he refuses surgery due to poverty, the lines between reality and Lovecraft's fiction blur. He experiences lucid dreams where he inhabits scenes from Lovecraft's stories, such as The Shadow over Innsmouth and the Dunwich Horror. The narrator stops eating and taking medication, allowing the cancer to take its course. He converses with Lovecraft about death and literature. Characters from the stories begin to appear in his daily life. In the end, the narrator accepts his fate, drifting away from his physical pain and merging completely into the fictional world, becoming a character within the mythos itself. The Broadsword, by Laird Barron. Pershing Dennard, a retired surveyor living in the Broadsword Hotel, is plagued by a heatwave and voices whispering from his ventilation ducts. The voices discuss eating organs and threaten him. Pershing recalls a traumatic event from his past where his partner, Terry Walker, disappeared in the wilderness. Pershing survived but carries deep guilt. He attempts to investigate the voices with the help of a neighbor, but finds no physical evidence. Eventually, Terry Walker appears in Pershing's apartment, not as a ghost, but as an alien entity wearing Terry's form. He is accompanied by a woman named Gloria. They reveal they are part of an ancient colonizing species that hides in the dark. They abduct Pershing, torturing him and revealing the true nature of the cosmos. Pershing is returned to the hotel, broken. He tries to resume a normal life with his girlfriend Wanda, but the psychological conditioning takes hold. During a camping trip, Pershing succumbs to the alien influence, tearing off his own face to reveal the monster beneath, fully assimilated into the family. Usurped by William Browning Spencer. Brad and his wife Meta are driving through the desert when they are attacked by a swarm of wasps. Brad wakes up in a hospital. Meta is physically unharmed, but seems emotionally distant and changed. A man named Parkington visits Brad, claiming the attack was a hallucination induced by an alien intelligence residing beneath the local mountains. He believes this entity usurps humans, replacing their consciousness. Brad recovers, but finds Meta increasingly alien. He can no longer sense her presence intuitively as he used to. When Parkington disappears, Brad tracks Meta back to the desert town of Silo. He meets a local drunk, Muskie, who leads him into the mountains to a glowing abyss. Muskie reveals that Meta was rejected by the entity because of her cancer treatments, but Brad has been groomed for this moment. A wasp stings Brad, triggering a hallucination. He receives a call from Meta, seeing her frail mortality clearly, and in a surge of monstrous joy, he throws himself into the abyss to be consumed and transformed. Denker's Book, by David J. Shaw. The narrator recounts the story of Langford Meyer Denker, a scientist who lost his Nobel Prize for alleged fraud. Denker had built a machine capable of warping dimensions, but critics claimed he cheated by using a mysterious book. This book was a composite of forbidden knowledge gathered from scholars and madmen across the globe. Denker used the book as the core component of his machine, replacing the mechanical heart. The experiment caused a global shift. The sun no longer rises, and the world is freezing and overrun by beasts. The narrator explains that the book was not destroyed but discomponentialized and reassembled by Denker. The story implies the narrator is trapped in a room, waiting to find Denker to understand the new, dark reality that has overtaken the Earth. Inhabitants of Wraithwood, by W. H. Pugmire. Hank Foster, an ex-convict and recovering addict, gets lost in the woods and is rescued by a man resembling Jesus. He is taken to a large house called Wraithwood, inhabited by eccentrics who resemble figures from famous paintings. There is a woman named Pera, who mimics Millais' Ophelia, and a legless man named Eblis, who resembles the incubus from Fuseli's The Nightmare. Hank learns that the paintings in their rooms are originals, some by Richard Upton Pickman, and that the inhabitants are slowly transforming into the subjects of the art. Hank is seduced by the atmosphere and by Pera. He participates in their surreal rituals and consumes their strange food. He discovers that the inhabitants are essentially feeding themselves to an ancient source of artistic inspiration and madness. In the end, he witnesses the ritual sacrifice of Pera, who is drowned in a pool, and realizes he is being absorbed into this macabre gallery of living art. The Dome, by Molly L. Burleson. Tom, a retiree, moves to Sandrock, New Mexico. The town is shadowed by a massive silver-domed building that serves as a junk shop. The proprietor is a reptilian-looking old man. Tom visits the dome to buy a bed for his granddaughter. While inside, the aperture at the top of the dome opens, revealing a sky of roiling, unnatural blackness, despite it being a clear day outside. Tom sees a massive, tentacled entity attempting to enter. His screams startle the proprietor, who closes the aperture just in time. Later, Tom learns the dome has been boarded up. He realizes the proprietor was a servant of the entity and was likely consumed by it when the aperture closed. Tom lives out his days in fear, haunted by the memory of the thing that almost broke through into our world. Rotterdam, by Nicholas Royle. Joe is a screenwriter scouting locations in Rotterdam for a film adaptation of a Lovecraft story. He is frustrated by his lack of success and jealous of the current scriptwriter John Maines. Joe meets Maines, who is dismissive and arrogant. They go drinking, and the night becomes a blur of alcohol and resentment. Joe wakes up in his hotel room with a hangover and discovers Maines' mutilated corpse on the floor. He has no memory of the murder, but decides he must cover it up to survive. In a gruesome sequence, Joe dismembers the body in the bathtub and disposes of the parts and evidence throughout the city. He assumes Maines' identity to board a ferry back to England, committing himself to a life of deception, believing that this act of recycling, a term Maines used for adaptation, was necessary for his own survival. Tempting Providence, by Jonathan Thomas. Justin, a photographer, returns to Providence for an exhibition of his work. He recalls a youthful encounter with the ghost of H.P. Lovecraft in the art building. During his stay, he feels a growing, insatiable hunger and a compulsion to wander the city. He sees the ghost of Lovecraft again, beckoning him. He also notices a strange, three-lobed security light that appears in his photos where it shouldn't be. He clashes with Dr. Palazzo, a university administrator who refuses to reimburse his expenses. In a confrontation at the gallery, reality shifts, and they find themselves in the Providence of the past. The sky tears open to reveal a cosmic horror, an anglerfish-like entity that uses the image of Lovecraft as a lure. Palazzo panics and is sucked into the void. Justin survives by clinging to a desk. He returns to his own time, telling the police Palazzo vanished during a tremor. He leaves Providence, but keeps the digital camera containing images of the entity, knowing he is forever marked. Howling in the Dark, by Daryl Schweitzer. The narrator recounts his troubled childhood, marked by an obsession with darkness and a dysfunctional family. He met a stone man in his dreams who taught him to howl a sound that reaches across the universe. On the night his family committed suicide, the narrator went out naked into the snow and communed with this entity, learning the secrets of the void. He spent years in institutions, eventually learning to fake normality. He married and had a child, but when his wife developed cancer, his facade crumbled. Unable to deal with the human grief, he returned to the darkness. He realizes that his sin was not being a monster, but failing to fully cast off his humanity. He is now a lost soul, wandering the darkness and howling, neither fully human nor fully transcended. The Truth About Pickman, by Brian Stableford. Alistair Thurber, a molecular biologist and grandson of a Pickman associate,
Visit Silas Elliot on the Isle of Wight. Thurber believes Pickman's transformation into a ghoul was caused by a mutational trigger, a specific protein or genetic trait carried by families from Salem. He wants to test a painting in Elliot's possession for traces of this trigger. Elliot reveals that he is not Silas Elliot's grandson, but Silas Elliot himself, having extended his life through the same dark practices. He explains that Thurber has likely already been infected by the trigger simply by being in the house and drinking the local water. The transformation is not just physical, but alters one's perception of fear and aesthetics. Thurber leaves, doomed to undergo the same metamorphosis as Pickman, gaining a terrifying intimacy with the subject of his research. Tunnels by Philip Haldeman. The narrator recalls his childhood in a Seattle apartment building where he suffered nightmares about giant white worms tunneling from below. His grandfather reveals that he and other tenants are survivors of a subway tunnel construction crew who encountered these creatures years ago. The worms have been hunting them ever since. One night, the creatures attack. The grandfather and other tenants sacrifice themselves, setting the building on fire to drive the creatures back and allow the children to escape. The narrator survives, but the memory haunts him. He speculates that as humanity digs deeper, these encounters will become more frequent, threatening the surface world. The Correspondence of Cameron Thaddeus Nash by Ramsey Campbell. This story is presented as a series of letters from Nash, a British recluse, to H.P. Lovecraft. Initially, Nash is a fan, praising Lovecraft's dream-inspired fiction. However, as Lovecraft fails to help Nash get published, the tone turns hostile. Nash claims to be a superior dreamer, in contact with a true cosmic entity that is physically manifesting inside his brain. He mocks Lovecraft's fiction as pulp and his life choices. Nash describes his own transformation, mentioning a mouth forming in his brain and his isolation from the world. The final letter includes a photograph which is described in the annotations. It shows Nash with a jaw distended to impossible proportions, a gaping hole consuming half his face, revealing the darkness he has let in. Violence, Child of Trust by Michael Sisko. The story is told from the alternating perspectives of three men, Julius, Todd, and the intellectually disabled Grover. They live in isolation, capturing women to use in a ritual. When Todd receives a sign, a visual distortion, they know it is time to act. They select a girl, Ruth, whom they have been keeping captive. The ritual involves surgery and mutilation to extract a specific organ or sac from the victim, which is then burned to summon the entities. They enter a trance state, visiting palaces of light. The story ends with the brutal execution of the ritual, highlighting the banality of their evil and the terrifying reality of the entities they serve. Lesser Demons by Norman Partridge. Sheriff John Dalton and his deputy Roy Barnes encounter monsters, lesser demons, spawning from corpses on a county road. The world falls into chaos as the dead transform into various monstrosities. Barnes becomes obsessed with occult books found in a wrecked car, believing he can control the phenomena. Dalton focuses on survival, killing the creatures with his shotgun. Barnes eventually succumbs to madness, carving words into his own flesh to become a key. Dalton is forced to kill him. Later, the military arrives, treating the infestation as a tactical problem. Dalton, weary and pragmatic, accepts the new reality, ready to adapt to whatever role he must play in this altered world. An Eldritch Matter by Adam Niswander. David Thompson, an ordinary office worker, picks up a small metal disc on the street engraved with a tentacle design. At work, he is struck by agonizing pain. His body begins to dissolve and reshape. His bones melt, his limbs become tentacles, and he loses his facial features. He is rushed to the hospital, fully conscious but unable to speak. He realizes he has become a gill-breathing aquatic entity. A doctor finds the metal disc embedded in David's flesh. When the doctor touches it, he too begins to scream and transform, indicating the disc is a contagion that will spread this horrific transmutation to others. Substitution by Michael Marshall Smith. The narrator, a bored husband working from home, receives a grocery delivery meant for a neighbor. The bags contain rich, unhealthy foods unlike his own family's prudent diet. Intrigued, he tracks down the woman who ordered them. He becomes obsessed with her, spying on her house. One night, he looks through her basement window and sees her eating raw meat on the rug. She turns, revealing a face that is inhuman, with a mouth that opens too wide and a misshapen skull. He flees, realizing she and others like her are living disguised among humans. He returns to his life, terrified and changed, disposing of any strange food that arrives, trying to ignore the monsters living just down the street. Susie, by Jason Van Hollander. Susie Lovecraft lies dying in Butler Hospital. Her mind fractures into multiple personalities and perspectives. She hallucinates that her body is a vessel for 1,000 unborn. She worries about her son, Howard, whom she views as frail and sickly. In a delirium, she engages in a cosmic coupling with an avatar of her dead husband to ensure her son's destiny. She creates a tangible ideation of Howard that feeds on her pain and vitality. She sacrifices herself, allowing her essence to be consumed so that her son can become the prophet of the old ones, ushering in the age of the entities she senses waiting in the void. And there you have it, a complete journey through Black Wings of Cthulhu. This anthology demonstrates that the Lovecraftian tradition is far from dead. It has evolved. These authors move beyond simple pastiche, relocating the cosmic horror from the 1920s to modern cities, deserts, and hospitals. They explore the psychological toll of the unknown, suggesting that the true horror lies not just in tentacles and monsters, but in the fragility of the human mind when confronted with the infinite. Thank you for watching The Well-Read Monocle. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the abyss, do consider subscribing for more literary explorations. Until next time, keep your lamps lit and your doors locked.